So thank you, everybody. I think you had the opportunity to have one briefing after another. Will be a short stakeout. I have to inform you about the following. So the Security Council discussed today under the AOB on our initiative the threat of chemical provocations in Ukraine. To our deep regret, our predictions about Ukrainian radical nationalist groups preparing to stage chemical provocations on the territories under their control are coming to life. In the evening of March 21, a planned provocation of Ukrainian nationalists was carried out in Sumy, resulting in ammonia leak at Sumy Chimprom plant. According to Sumy Regional Administration, there is neither risk to the residents of Sumy, since the air masses were moving offwards from the city, nor the casualties. As you might remember, we have warned the international community about such provocations on numerous occasions, both in OPCW and in the UN Security Council. Yet, on March 10, we have submitted to the Council a non-paper on several scenarios of the false flag chemical provocations by the Ukrainian radicals that they are preparing to stage with the assistance of the Western intelligence and private military companies in order to accuse Russia of allegedly using chemical weapons. We specifically warned about the planned provocation by radicals at the Sumy Chimprom chemical plant as early as on March 19. Our Ministry of Defense reported at the open briefing that the nationalists mined storage facilities with ammonia and chlorine in order to poison the residents of Sumy region if the Russian armed forces enter the city. We also warned that the Ukrainian militants have brought containers with toxic chemical substances to the primary school building in the village of Kotlярova in the Nikolaev region. They are planned to be blown up when the Russian armed forces approach. The statements by the Kiev regime that the above-mentioned plant was shelled by the Russian armed forces are no more than a fake and deliberate disinformation to cover up their actions that endanger the lives of civilians. We would like to reiterate that the armed forces of the Russian Federation have never planned or carried out strikes against any Ukrainian facilities where toxic substances are stored or produced. The Russian army ensures security of such objects on the territories liberated from radical groups. We are deeply concerned by the recent developments in Sumy, as well as in other regions, with regards to chemical provocations staged by the Ukrainian nationalist groups. Given the record of negligence by the Kiev regime of the Biological Weapon Convention, by developing of a military biological program with the help of the USA, as well as its pursuit of nuclear weapons, it is clear that the Ukrainian nationalist authorities, encouraged by the Western countries, will stop at nothing to intimidate its own people and stage false flag attacks to accuse Russia. Colleagues, we see a familiar pattern in Ukraine which is similar to orchestrated chemical incidents in Syria, which were staged by terrorist groups with the help of the Western intelligence and notorious NGOs like the White Helmets, and used as a pretext to accuse Syrian authorities of the use of chemical weapons. There is alarming evidence that more chemical provocations by the radicals in Ukraine, which put lives and health of civilians at risk, are to follow. In the course of special military operation, our Ministry of Defense has obtained the combat documentation of the 4th Brigade of the Ukrainian National Guard with a map with coordinates of all objects where toxic substances are stored or produced on the territory of Ukraine, as well as the data on the types of specific substances. I want to stress that the Kiev nationalist regime, along with its sponsors, will be directly responsible and held accountable for any possible incidents with Ukrainian storage facilities of toxic substances.
Mr. Ambassador, the West and the United States have vehemently denied that there are any chemical or biological weapons in Ukraine, and so have the Ukrainians, and the United States and other Western nations have said that they believe that Russia's repeated warnings about this are a false flag operation to launch chemical and biological weapons in Ukraine. What is your response to this?
I think that the facts prove otherwise. We conducted 2 meetings of Security Council on biological laboratories in Ukraine, and we presented evidence, and more evidence is to come, to see that United States were implementing a secret biological weapons program with the help of Ukrainians, and sometimes Ukrainians were not even aware of what they are doing. You know that there are hundreds of laboratories, of US laboratories all over the world, and we don't know what's happening in their laboratories, and the documents that we obtained unfortunately render us more and more pessimistic. And again, there is more to come on biological laboratories. As for chemical weapons, I think you shouldn't forget that Russia has got rid of its chemical weapons, and this was confirmed by OPCW. Actually, the only country that still officially possesses chemical weapons is the United States. And the United States has a long track record of using these weapons. It's enough to remember about Vietnam. I understand that the memory of our American colleagues usually is limited to the 4 years of current administration, but the world memory is much deeper than that. And that's why we have all the reasons to be cautious. And the facts prove otherwise. We're now speaking about concrete facts of usage of ammonia as possible weapons by Ukrainian nationalists. The facts are in front of you. The citizens of Sumy know that it happened. It's not a problem to detect any possible strike on this facility, which was not the case. So the facts are absolutely proven that our Western colleagues are waging a disinformation campaign against Russia.
Ambassador, could you give us an update, please? Could you give us an update, please, on the humanitarian
Sorry, let's give.
Ambassador, I have 2 questions. The first question is, why now? Why you come here to talk about the alleged use of potential chemical weapon by the Ukrainians? Do you think such an attack in Ukraine is imminent? And my second question is, what is your response to Secretary General's remarks this morning that this war is unwinnable and it's better for Russia just to come to the table right now than later?
Okay, as for why right now, if you listen to me, you would understand that this provocation happened actually in the night of March 21. And we warned about it on 19 March and before, concretely, specifically about this plan. That's why I'm here presenting these facts to you and warning that there might be more chemical provocations to come, and they will be tried to be blamed on Russia. As for Secretary General's words, of course, war is a bad thing. But if you listen to us attentively when we were describing the reasons why it started, why this military operation started, you would understand that it started to end another war, which was continuing for 8 years. And we decided that all other resources, all other options were exhausted, and there was no other way to secure that people in the east of Ukraine, civilian infrastructure in the east of Ukraine would not suffer from Ukrainian shellings. That was the decision taken by my leadership.
Ambassador, could you give us an update, please, on the humanitarian resolution situation? Are you planning to go for a vote tomorrow in the Security Council?
Yes, we do.
And then on the South African draft that's circulating now for the General Assembly.
I'm not South African, so I can't speak on their behalf.
Are you coordinating with them at
Absolutely
all on
not.
it? What is Ambassador Nebenzia's phone call with the non-aligned?
Sorry?
Ambassador Nebenzia is having a phone call with the non-aligned movement members today.
We do.
Is it on that resolution?
We do it, no, it's just to explain our position. But we do it regularly, not only on this occasion. I think it's normal when you work in the United Nations to explain your position to a wider membership. That's what we're doing.
Ambassador, will you vote for any resolution?
Given your concern about weapons, biological weapons, would you agree to a cessation of hostilities if the UN were to go in and investigate and look at these facilities? Would Russia welcome that?
We proposed a draft resolution in Security Council, which will be voted tomorrow. And it will be a good proof for our Western colleagues to see whether they really care about the things that they promote in their statements, because they are all in our resolution. So we'll see if they are serious about these things or it's just a false flag for them.
Ambassador,
Yeah.
the Western nations have been clear that Western nations have been clear that they will not support your draft in the Council, so there's an expectation that it would fail. Then it moves to the General Assembly. There are 2 drafts, one from Western nations, one put forward by South Africa. Would you support any of the 2 in the GA?
I think that if Western nations do not support our draft, this is just the reflection of their hypocrisy. Because one thing is to speak about these things, and the other thing is to take a decision. Everybody understands that in order to help humanitarian agencies, Security Council has to say its position and to give them some instructions. That's what we are proposing to do, without any politicization, as any other humanitarian resolution adopted ever by Security Council. And that's why we don't understand why people would be saying one thing and acting in absolutely other way. As for humanitarian resolutions, well, frankly, we don't know what's the added value of humanitarian resolutions by General Assembly, and we don't want them to turn, especially the Western one, to turn into another anti-Russian biased document. We don't think that we need such a document. So, of course, we will define our position on these premises. One last question, please.
The UN, which is working on the humanitarian situation in Ukraine, is asking for an immediate cessation of hostilities. Is Russia willing to do this, even without a Security Council situation?
I can repeat my answer that Russia is introducing the draft of the Security Council, which introduces negotiated ceasefire. So
you can declare a ceasefire without a resolution.
Yes, but I explained to you the reasoning that we started this military operation to pursue certain aims and to stop the war in the east of Ukraine. So we need to continue to implement these aims, because otherwise the war will never end. It was an illusion that there was no war for 8 years and everybody was trying not to disregard it, but the war was happening, and you can ask people in the east of Ukraine, you can see a lot of evidence, and you will see that the war was going on, and there were a lot of casualties of this war, including children. So it's not that if we declare ceasefire tomorrow, things will be resolved. So there is a more serious and complex solution that needs to be approached, to be found, and we are trying to do this. Okay.
Ambassador, the Ukrainian President Zelensky said recently that he's ready to talk or consider the status of Crimea and Donbass. Also, he talked about the option of not joining the NATO. Are these assurances to your country, which is doing this military operation in Ukraine?
We heard a lot of statements from President Zelensky. Some of them contradict the others. I think that there is a team of my colleagues who deal with negotiations and with the Ukrainian side, and they assess whether they are serious or not serious to discuss real things. And so far, I feel that they are not very much enthusiastic by the approach of the Ukrainian side. That's what I can say. Thank you, everybody.
Is it true 10,000 Russian soldiers have been killed? And if not, do you know how many have died?
I have seen different figures. Our Ministry of Defense provides updates on this, so you can of course look at these figures. But this is far from what you are saying, and don't believe everything that is being said on the internet. Unfortunately, doesn't reflect what is happening. Thank you.
Is the regime change still your goal in Ukraine?
It was never changed. It was never a regime change. We said that we wanted to denazify Ukraine, but we were saying that Zelensky still remains president of Ukraine from the very beginning.